Hello and welcome to the Utah Rural Summit's virtual symposium series. The Utah Rural Summit has a rich history of convening key stakeholders to discuss and share innovations that have been keeping our rural communities vibrant. This presentation focuses on an important aspect of having a healthy and resilient community. Listen to the gained experience, examples, and leadership. When we come together, share our best, and are willing to support each other, we collectively win. Enjoy participating in this session.
Welcome to everyone who's watching this virtual breakout session. We're glad that you've been able to join us today to talk about adapting to disruption, what rural businesses can do to succeed in a volatile world. I'm joined this morning by Congressman Ben McAdams, who, if you don't know, is our current congressman for the 4th District here in Utah. He's provided incredible leadership both on trade issues, but also on issues like the national debt and affordable housing, as a member of the Financial Services Committee, Space, Science, and Technology, and also as the co-chair of the new Democratic Task Force on housing. So fantastic to have Ben here on the call today to discuss what he's been doing out in Washington. We're also joined by Brad Bonham. Brad is the founder and CEO of Walker Edison, who, if you didn't know already, is one of the fastest growing, I think the 4th fastest growing business here in Utah, as reported by Business Magazine. Walker Edison has operations across the world, in South America, in Asia, and Europe. And Brad is not only a successful CEO, but a great leader on business issues here in the state. He's a member of the World Trade Center board, also of the board of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and has been providing insight and leadership across the state on various issues for a while now. Fantastic to have you on, Brad. We're also joined by Don Willey, who is the president and CEO of the St. George Chamber of Commerce. Don is my former boss and a mentor and good friend, and I'm glad to be able to have him on today. He spent years here at World Trade Center Utah building up our programs, our rural program in particular, and has keen insight on what's going on in rural Utah. Don represents businesses from one of the fastest growing regions in the United States, and will also provide great insight into this topic. You know, when we talk about global volatility, we've all been kind of flooded, if you will, with negative news over the last 6 months, and not without reason, right? If anything, the last few months and even the last few years have taught us that the world can change very quickly, and we're not always going to be able to know what's happening. The last few months have really been characterized by some shock and also by uncertainty about the future. But today, what I want to talk about is positivity. How are businesses adapting? What's some of the good news that's happening nowadays, and why is this as good a time as any for Utah businesses and rural businesses in particular to start thinking about international markets as a way to grow, as a way to build some resilience against economic shocks into your business? And so we'll talk at the national level, the perspective from Washington. We'll talk at the local level and at the business level. And so I want to start first with the view from Washington, and then we'll work a little bit closer to home. One of the great events that was overshadowed this summer by COVID-19 was that USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, finally came into force. This was a years-long effort by those in Washington to modernize the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. And really, its passing and its enforcement is really a historic moment for global trade for a number of reasons. But it wasn't a slam dunk. It took a lot of work. Congressman McAdams, you've provided fantastic leadership on trade, been engaging quite a bit on trade issues. I remember in 2019, just last year, when Vice President Pence came out to Utah, he made a direct appeal to you to help Democrats bring the trade agreement to the floor and get it passed before he entered into an election year where that might not be as easy to do. Can you tell us a bit about the inside baseball of getting USMCA passed, and more importantly, what are some of the benefits that are going to come to rural Utah businesses as a result of the new trade agreement?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, it was an honor to work with this White House and with the Vice President and so many on the White House staff to really get this agreement across the finish line. There was a time where people were predicting that it was going to be another victim of partisan gridlock and Democrats versus Republican infighting in DC, where nothing was good enough for either side. And I really knew that we needed to get a deal. We needed to, for the sake of Utah businesses, we needed to rise above partisanship and get something done. So early last year, soon after I was sworn into office, I started hearing from Utah businesses and Utah farmers and organizations such as the World Trade Center Utah about the importance of USMCA and the trading relationship between the US and Mexico and the US and Canada, and how important that trading relationship is to Utah's economy. So when the president reached the agreement with Mexico and Canada and submitted that agreement to Congress, there were some members who were all too happy to sit on it and to do nothing. Some members actually had legitimate ideas on ways to improve the agreement. And, you can always improve an agreement. And I think you see that reflected in the final deal that was signed into law. There were changes that were made that I think made it even stronger for American companies and American businesses. We were able to improve the environmental provisions and even labor provisions to ensure that US companies weren't undercut by their competitors in Mexico or Canada. We have clean air and clean water standards that our companies have to adhere to. And if their competitors across the border are not following those same standards, that's to our competitive disadvantage. We all want clean air and clean water, but we want our competitors across the border to also follow those same standards so they don't undercut our price. And so we were able to strengthen some of the environmental provisions or labor provisions, such as, labor standards, overtime, child labor laws, some of those things. So when members of my own party started trying to stall the bill just to stall it and to not give the president a win, that's when I said that enough is enough. Working with some of my other colleagues who also recognize the importance of the issue, colleagues on both sides of the aisle, how important this issue was to our country, to our nation's economy, we told Speaker Pelosi that this issue is too important to let politics get in the way. If you have policy differences, you have to work through those. Failure is not an option, and partisanship is not an answer that we can give to hardworking U.S. employees. So we pushed. We took to the House floor to demand action on the agreement, and finally, we were able to reach an agreement to get the bill on the House floor toward the end of last year, end of 2019. I'll tell you, it wasn't pretty. It hurt some feelings amongst colleagues, and it took too long. But the important thing was that we got it done. We got it up for a vote. It passed the House. It went on to pass the Senate and signed into law by the president. In terms of how that helps rural Utah and rural America, I believe it was the Farm Bureau who said that USMCA is expected to increase U.S. ag exports by $2 billion and result in a $65 billion increase in gross domestic product. That means a lot to hardworking people who are trying to put food on the table back at home. It gives certainty to farmers and ranchers that they have markets for their products. Ag exports account for almost $500 million a year just in Utah alone. And rural America has manufacturing. It's not just ag. There's manufacturing as well. And this agreement ensures that those large trading markets remain open to sustain our domestic jobs. One of the things that I've heard that's most important about this USMCA agreement is it gives certainty to U.S. businesses as they're looking to maybe expand operations, to modernize a manufacturing plant or invest in additional farm equipment, knowing that this agreement's in place, that they can rely on the framework for a market in which they engage in trade and capitalism and exports, knowing the rules are set helps them to proceed in confidence to make investments in growing their business and modernizing their business. And that really means a lot to Utah companies.
I absolutely agree. I love the point you bring up about certainty, because most people forget how critical North American trade is, not just for the U.S., but for Utah. Our top two trading partners are Mexico and Canada. We talk a lot about China, and we'll talk about China later today. But we can't forget how important Canada and Mexico are to our businesses. More than $1.4 trillion passes across North American borders each year in trade. And so that's more than any other trading partner or even most trading partners combined. It's just incredible the amount of trade that comes to Utah and to the United States from those two nations. Brad and Don, both of you have a business perspective here as a representative business or business owners yourselves, both of you. I'd like to get your perspective. What do you think the impacts of USMCA are going to be both for your businesses and also for Utah and rural Utah more generally?
I'll speak to it from my point of view really quickly before I let Don, who's significantly smarter than I am, kind of jump in. We have employees both in Mexico and Canada. So Canada is one of our largest trading partners. We treat them kind of like the 51st state. And so I have facilities up there. I believe that maybe when NAFTA was passed, there were probably different themes kind of going around. The world has changed since NAFTA was passed, and it was well past time to kind of even the playing field in a number of different areas for our country. And so when I look at it, I spent a great deal of time in St. George. I also spent a great deal of time with my friends in Kanab. I think it was a real opportunity for my agricultural friends that own these businesses and farms, dairy farmers. I mean, things needed to have the playing field reset. And so I think, from my perspective as an entrepreneur, this was a more fair deal for the United States of America than previously under NAFTA. And so I'm thankful to Representative McAdams and to the rest of our trade delegation for working with the president, and his cabinet in getting this passed, because I think it is a huge win for the state of Utah specifically. I mean, $500 million is not immaterial. That's a big, big number, and that's all gone our way. And so I'm very thankful for that.
Thank you. Don?
I couldn't agree more. And I think at the end of the day, Utah businesses win. I spent a good chunk of my time when I was at the World Trade Center traveling throughout rural Utah. And there were so many barriers to trade for small businesses, and it really hurt them, especially agriculture businesses. And Representative McAdams spoke to that, especially on the agriculture side, where this levels the playing field, and it gives our businesses an opportunity to actually compete in a global market, whereas before they tried and failed because of those barriers, or they didn't even try because they had heard horror stories. And we had the horror story list. I think that, Jim, I don't know if you're still compiling all those of trade opportunities that went south, of deals that went south because of the regulatory barriers. And it's sad to see that small businesses before couldn't tap into these markets, whereas they now can. I think it's just important as you think about what this has done, and I think it changes the mindset. Not only does the policy actually change the logistics of trade, it actually changes the mindset of businesses and allows them to think that it's attainable. It's something that they can do. Just in terms of reducing some of those, the barriers. I mean, the de minimis value threshold was increased. So again, it's now easier to actually move goods and reduce paperwork. For anyone that's had to navigate exports and the paperwork associated with it, it can get pretty hairy and pretty burdensome very quickly, to the extent that you don't want to do it anymore. And so just that alone, increasing the protections on IP is a big component of this, to actually protect intellectual property of businesses and have more comfort there. Really just this was such a monumental shift, and just like Brad said, long overdue, right? We look at the evolution of the economy, the global economy, and it's just something that was long overdue. And it at the end of the day, it's good for our businesses, and it allows Utah businesses to compete and win on a global level.
That's such an important point, that the change in paradigm from kind of free trade to fair trade is one that allows our businesses here in Utah to compete, and to compete on a level playing field and with a level of certainty that helps. I think one of the important points you could tease out too from your comments, Don, is, and especially that de minimis value, the new protections for IP, is that these are especially beneficial for small businesses, for businesses that don't always have the cash to pursue an IP strategy abroad, or who can't always devote more cash into taxes and tariffs when they're exporting to Canada and Mexico. So I think incredibly important points. Speaking of fair trade and speaking of being able to compete, we couldn't have this conversation if we didn't talk at least a little bit about what's going on in China. Whether we're talking about TikTok or Huawei or tensions in the South China Sea or humanitarian and civil rights abuses or in Xinjiang or in Hong Kong, the U.S.-China relationship, I think, is clearly at its worst point in decades. It's for a number of different reasons. And I wanted to ask Congressman McAdams, from your view in Washington, are we right now in the midst of an economic decoupling from China? And if so, or if not, what do you think the impacts are going to be on Utah businesses?
Well, I think that's a great question. First, let me just say as an aside, as a parent of teenagers, I've been trying to ban TikTok for years. So kudos to the president on that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not wading into the technology there. But look, I think that's a great question, and one that I know our businesses are struggling with every day here in Utah. First, I think we can agree that China historically has had unfair practices in our trading relationship. They steal intellectual property. They have government subsidized and dumped products that harm U.S. competitors. And so any discussion with China should try to address those unfair practices, that imbalance. Unfortunately, I think we took a bad approach in trying to address that. We've put tariffs on nearly everything out of China, which doesn't harm China. It harms U.S. consumers or U.S. companies doing some manufacturing process in China. And all that results in retaliatory tariffs from China. And often ag products are the first thing targeted since the ag export sector is so large here in the United States. I do think we will continue to have a strained relationship with China. But my thought on what that means for business is that you can't ignore China. They are big enough that they're something we have to continue to take into account. China has over 1 billion people. It's an important market. It's an important competitor, even if we don't get along or see eye to eye on everything. So I think businesses still have to pay attention. That means that the government has to have a strategic plan to deal with some of the unsavory practices by the Chinese government. But I'm not sure indiscriminately getting into a trade war with constantly escalating tariffs is the solution.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Brad, the furniture industry is one that I think is uniquely vulnerable to some of these changes, and doubly so because of COVID-19. Can you tell us a bit about what your perspective is on the trade war, how it's affected Walker Edison, and how you expect to shift your supply chain or operations as a result?
Yeah, Representative McAdams is correct. The tariffs that are applied to these goods inbound from China, I'm the one that gets to pay that. And then ultimately, in many cases, those tariffs are passed along to the end consumer. And so in many cases, people talk about it being kind of a tax increase on some of those goods. On the flip side, I'm very, very supportive of this administration's attempts to level the playing field with China. I mean, for many, many years, and I've been going there for 18 years. So I started my business as a senior at the University of Utah. And my very first product came out of China. And now, we are reliant on multiple different source countries. From the day President Trump came into office, his promise was to hold China accountable. And so whether or not we all agree on kind of the strategy and the tactics that he's been utilizing, I give him major props because China is such a giant player in the world economy. Somebody had to do something. And so whether or not you agree with kind of his approach and his strategy, I do give him major props for tackling the issue. The way it's affected my business, we have been able to, move some of our supply chain outside of China. But as Ben McAdams just indicated, China has 1.4 billion people in the country. It's a little flippant to say, hey, let's just move supply chains. These supply chains have been built up over 50 years, trillions of dollars spent. If you want me to move to Vietnam or to Malaysia or even here to the United States, we're looking at billions and billions and billions of dollars that need to be invested. I don't have, as a small business owner, I don't have billions and billions of dollars to retool my entire supply chain. And so you add up the entire capacity of Southeast Asia, and you still don't equal what China is able to produce for me. So China still is a key source, even with the tariff charges being charged to us. So we continue to look for opportunities, obviously, both domestically and coming back to North America. There are opportunities in both Mexico and Canada that we continue to prop up. And those are great opportunities because it really reduces the lead times that we're even looking at. So as a small business owner, cash is very important. When we outlay cash to China, certain amount of lead time plus 35 days on the water to our door, I can get rid of that entire month's worth of cash flow by sourcing and propping up factories in both Mexico and Canada. So I think there are opportunities. Anytime you look at this and you say, hey, this is a challenging environment, with our relationship with China, I invite you to press your people. Let's look for additional opportunities then. And so we've been able to move a lot of our sourcing outside of China at this point.
Yeah. Businesses need that innovative mindset that you're demonstrating for us to be able to meet these challenges and actually to succeed despite these challenges. I think we've seen a lot of Utah businesses really step up to the moment over the last few months, whether it's changing their business model, where it's finding new suppliers, where it's finding innovative and new ways to reach customers. I think you're demonstrating exactly what businesses need to do. Don, St. George businesses aren't exempt from the trade war either. I was talking just the other day with Ultraspire, who provides ultra marathon and ultra running equipment. This fantastic small business out in St. George who's been struggling with things like sourcing because of the trade war. What's your perspective on how businesses are adapting and especially adapting out in St. George, where you're not quite as close to things like an international airport or some of the important infrastructure that companies need to trade?
Yeah, we're definitely in a peculiar spot. For being such an international tourism destination, it's still difficult to run an international business from St. George on the logistics side. But at least we get our marketing opportunity by bringing everyone here. So we're grateful for that.
That's right.
Just as we're talking about this, I think to some extent the difficulties that are put in place because of the trade war have almost resulted in a rejuvenation of innovation in some of these businesses, right? For a business that has been exporting, that has been doing international business, we always say go global, because increasing that diversification makes you a more stable business long term. And really the businesses that have survived and grown during this difficult economic period have been those that have international markets. That diversification is so critical. And so does this trade war, so to speak, does it impact businesses maybe more so even in rural Utah or off the Wasatch Front Utah, as we like to say? Absolutely. I mean, it's harder to do business internationally from St. George than it is to do it in West Jordan or in Bountiful, because the proximity of the logistical hub at the international airport and accompanying infrastructure just increases the convenience. We're looking at the expansion of the foreign trade zone potentially into southern Utah as a big win for our businesses that would, again, lower the threshold and kind of put an additional tool on their belt when we consider the trade war. When we think of tapping into that international manufacturing, we are seeing a lot of reshoring at this time. We're seeing a lot of businesses that are looking domestically. The price point's higher, and ultimately, just like Brad talked about, it's going to get passed along to the consumer. A business can only eat so much of that margin, but it's going to get passed down. So there's definitely some negative effects that we see from it, but it creates jobs. It brings opportunity back home. So it's kind of difficult to pinpoint, but does that affect rural Utah, off the Wasatch Front Utah? Absolutely does. But we're finding creative ways. We're innovating, we're changing, we're pivoting to be able to make it work.
And you bring up a good point there about how communities can help to enhance trade. I think a foreign trade zone in St. George would be a fantastic resource, partly because of the kind of cash management that Brad's talking about. A foreign trade zone can mean you can defer paying taxes and tariffs on goods until you're fulfilling them to the customer, instead of when you're actually bringing them in, which decreases the outlays you have to make early and can help you manage your cash flow. So an important point that communities can do a lot to help their businesses to succeed, even in a volatile time. As we transition to a world of COVID-19, one important challenge that many businesses I'm talking to are facing is understanding how to engage with customers now that they're spending more time at home, now that they're not going to as many retail locations, now that their spending habits have changed. This is not just a US phenomenon, but a global phenomenon, even in markets where COVID-19 hasn't had the kind of impact like it's had here in Utah. One of the silver linings of these changes is that we've seen a dramatic increase year over year in e-commerce growth. I think in May, or it was in April or May, Adobe came out and said we're seeing e-commerce growth of something like 77% year over year, which is just incredible. Euromonitor sent a survey to thousands of businesses across the world, and 70% of those businesses responded positively to the question, has your e-commerce increased? So many businesses are finding ways to reach their customers via e-commerce channels, and COVID-19 is accelerating the trend, the digital commerce trend, in ways that I think companies can take advantage of. And there's probably no one who can better speak to that on this panel than Brad, who works primarily from an e-commerce model, has been quite successful with it. Brad, can you tell me about some lessons rural businesses can learn about how to use e-commerce to engage customers?
Yeah, I think the real beauty of e-commerce, there's a couple of obvious benefits. I mean, when COVID hit, all the brick and mortar stores shut down. Fortunately, a small parcel like UPS and FedEx were deemed critical to our nation's economy, and so those stayed open. So goods continued to flow. If you look at Amazon's recent quarterly earnings, Wayfair.com, who's a big partner of mine, I mean, we were all up 130% because people, as they started to work from home, realized, oh, hey, I do need that desk or that chair or that whatever, and purchases online just blew up. The beauty of being in rural Utah, you can have your cake and eat it too. We love the scenery, we love the lifestyle, we love living in these beautiful places in our country. Sometimes the jobs really aren't there to support what we want from a lifestyle perspective in rural Utah. But as long as you have internet access, I could have you up and selling on Amazon.com tomorrow. The vast majority of the employees that I'm hiring right now are outside of the Wasatch Front because COVID has opened up the opportunity for companies like mine who have historically been based out of an office in Salt Lake. We reverted to remote work environment for all several hundred of my employees in a 72-hour period. All of our productivity has gone up. People aren't driving as much. We've saved $45,000 on a gas bill that we've calculated for all of our employees. You're spending hours less a day driving. And so productivity has gone through the roof. In fact, I know, Ben and Don and I, we have gym shorts on under our dress shirts right now. It's a really great time in the world's history and in our economic history here in Utah to be able to focus your business on the e-commerce channels that have grown, what I think have grown 5 years in just a 120-day period. And so there is no better time to refocus your efforts on those e-commerce channels. They have made it so easy for us, as specifically for my business as a product-based business, to launch these products online and to get the world's eyeballs on your product listing. So if you don't have a robust e-commerce strategy right now in your business, my guess is for the most part, you've probably had a fairly hard time over the last 120 days. But there are resources, be it World Trade Center, be it GoEd, chambers, local chambers of commerce. I mean, we are all here to help your business succeed. We are very aligned both from a governmental level and a small business level. We want people succeeding in Utah. And so I would encourage anybody listening to this to seek out those resources. But e-commerce, guys, if you're going to launch a business right now, I don't know anyone that's saying, hey, I really want to be in brick and mortar. No, it's e-commerce, and that's our focus.
Thank you. You bring up, it's so important what the state's been doing over the last few years to ensure that rural Utahns have access to have access to the internet through strong fiber. I think the state legislators and the governor were prescient to push the Rural Online Initiative, which is a way to connect rural Utahns with work opportunities, even, as you said, when they're not in communities where those jobs might be present. Don, I wanted to ask you a bit about those efforts and a bit more about how communities can assist individuals who want to work remotely, or businesses that want to drive those e-commerce sales. Are there things that what can communities do to help businesses in that position?
You know, it's funny to think back 6-7 years ago, as the World Trade Center expanded its rural reach and supporting businesses off the Wasatch Front. And as you're out talking with businesses, as you're out meeting and understanding their needs, you just start to develop all these new ideas, things that you think may be able to help. And it's the powerful thing, and I appreciate our elected officials, Representative McAdams, our state level officials, because they're in a difficult spot with so many voices clamoring for attention and so many ideas that come up. To be able to sift through and find those that actually would work is really challenging. But it's been really awesome to see how Utah is leading out in this exact arena where we're talking about remote work. And we're light years ahead of other states in actually taking action. At one point we were dreaming about the day that every county could get some state funding and some local funding and create an incubation hub. If we're fortunate to have strong internet connectivity across the state, but there are some rural areas where there's a fiber backbone that goes down Main Street, but the cost to actually run it to houses is exorbitant. And so, the dream was, hey, how can we get some more innovation centers set up where there is high-speed connectivity, where people can come together, probably still in their gym shorts, but wearing a dress shirt, obviously. But they could actually meet up in an incubation area, in an innovation center, a small one, and actually have human interaction, but still work remotely, right? So they could get the remote opportunity, but maybe not have to deal with the isolation side of that. And so that's come about. We've seen an expansion of rural fiber, and especially the Rural Online Initiative, which was funded both with some federal and state monies, and it continues to get additional funding. But that's a resource that individuals and businesses can take an online certification and learn basic principles that will help them be successful in running a remote business or being a remote employee. And so you have those services that tackle both sides of that, and it's either low cost or no cost, depending on if there's subsidies or additional funding available. I mean, a Utahn anywhere in the state, especially in rural, they could take that course and learn best practices to actually help them be successful. Because it's a different type of work, right? To be able to shift your mindset of being in a people environment to still maintaining your personality, your work ethic, but doing it in a remote environment, it can be challenging. And so I think that that's one of those powerful tools that Utahns can tap into to actually be successful.
That's excellent. You think about the success that the Lassonde Institute at the University of Utah has by co-locating entrepreneurs. And what if you had a resource like that in each of our counties, right? The potential is fantastic, not only for innovation, but from what it sounds like from you and Brad, a large potential for pickup basketball games, because you're in your basketball shorts right now. And I definitely ought to be joining you in those basketball games.
I'll referee. How's that?
I don't know how your shot is, Don. We'll see how we recruit you.
It's not good. I do soccer. I don't do basketball.
Very good. To kind of bring things home to where we started, as Brad mentioned earlier, NAFTA was passed at a time before digital commerce and needed some additional remodernizing, and USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, sets an incredible new standard in digital trade rules between the participating nations. Congressman McAdams, can you tell me a bit about how USMCA provides a stable framework for e-commerce exporters?
Yeah, thank you. I actually think that's a really great question. And that I think it's important to recognize that e-commerce is more than just physical goods that are bought online, but it's also digital content such as movies or apps or ebooks. The original NAFTA was implemented before the internet had really taken off. And a lot of what USMCA does is update NAFTA for the 21st century. So things like ensuring that there are no duties on ebooks or music, for instance. That wasn't even a concept back in the 1990s, but those are very much part of the agreement today, as it should be. Another important thing for e-commerce is the de minimis threshold, or the level of goods which can travel between our countries that don't have duties or complex custom forms to fill out. And part of the negotiation between the Trump administration and Congress was ensuring that the domestic de minimis threshold wasn't artificially low. The simple goods and services, things that you might purchase on Overstock or from an eBay store or Amazon, for example, that they're not hit with tariffs or complex customs processing for just a single item, that you've got to fill out a form, and that if you're buying a one-off thing. And so we want to be able to enable that type of e-commerce, that type of trade, without cumbersome bureaucratic rules and forms that have to go along with it. And that was a really important accomplishment of the USMCA agreement.
Thank you. For those of you who are businesses and are thinking about exporting, understanding what USMCA does for you is critical, particularly if you're sending single packages over. That increased de minimis value is a fantastic win for trade. For small business exporters who might be sending one-off packages to single customers just all around North America. It'll save you a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort. So we're grateful that USMCA is now in force. We're running close to our 5-minute warning here. I want to end with a final question to each of you, starting maybe with Don, then Brad, then Congressman McAdams can finish this off. And that question is, what is the best reason for Utah businesses to be optimistic for 2021, for the future?
2020 is the best reason to be optimistic for 2021, right? I don't know what other option there is. I think you have to keep that optimism. But I'll just let me share from what I've seen and why I think businesses should be optimistic, not just for 2021, but for the future. I've been so impressed to see the innovation that has come out of this time of difficulty, and the pivots that businesses are making that we see on a daily basis has just, I think, solidified my love for Utah and my love for our people. It's so amazing to see that when you feel like, there's a tornado over Bear Lake one day and someone saying pigs are flying, and that may have very well been the case during that moment. You hear about these crazy things, the winds that are uprooting trees. I mean, there's so much, and yet our businesses are looking for opportunities to support themselves, to support their families, to support workers across the state, and they innovate to make that happen. And we've got an amazing example in Brad and his business, Walker Edison, but it's thousands and thousands of examples across the state. And just knowing that we have that ingenuity right here at home, we have the innovation, I think that to me is a reason to be optimistic, is we're already seeing the power of the innovation here in Utah.
Yeah, just to add to Don's comments, look, I grew up in California. There's a reason why I established my business here in Utah. So we are managed extraordinarily well fiscally. We've been given opportunities from our government. Now in my volunteer efforts on the GoEd board, all we talk about is supporting businesses and bringing in high-paying jobs and enabling companies to be as successful as possible. There's entire groups of people where this is their sole and every focus every single day. And so, when we look at the results of Utah, with a balanced budget, we don't have much debt. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the nation. And by the way, we've already announced 12,000 new jobs from GoEd this year that are, something like 130% above county average wages. So we continue in times of distress and in difficult moments. I feel like Utah is really good at turning those into opportunities. And so I'm watching this happen both as a private citizen and now in my volunteer efforts on the World Trade Center board and in GoEd. There is a ton of really great stuff coming down the pipe for Utah businesses. And I think we will continue to outperform our state peers around us for many years to come. I am very bullish and very optimistic on Utah's future.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would echo that as well. First of all, I agree with you, Don, that the best thing about 2021 is it's not 2020. But I'm bullish. I'm optimistic on Utah's future as well. I've always said that Utah is a great place to do business. We have incredible work ethic. We have a great talent base for companies to hire from. We have great universities, and we really have a strong entrepreneurial culture here. And so, looking ahead into next year and the years beyond that, I have absolute faith that Utah will do what it always does. We adapt, we rise to the top. Yeah, there are going to be challenges, and the recovering domestic and global economy from COVID is a top of mind when we talk about some of the challenges we may continue to face in 2021. But Utah has always adapted. We found new opportunities, and we succeed. And my commitment to Utah and to our business owners and to our workforce is that I will be here to help in any way to address the challenges that come our way. That's the Utah way. We work together, we meet our challenges head on, and we rise above them.
Thank you. If I'm hearing you all, there's a common theme here, which is that Utah has the best people in the world, and frankly, some of the best leadership in the world at the state level and at the national level and in the business community. So thank you all for participating today, for lending your insight. I know I've learned a lot from listening to each of you, and I hope that those of you who are watching this virtual breakout session are also enlightened or maybe uplifted by what we've talked about today. So thank you all, and I hope I'll be seeing you in person soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much for participating in this virtual symposium. We really appreciate your attendance and your willingness to understand details that will help our rural communities. As you continue to take action in your community, reach out to the experts you spent time listening to. They're here to be mentors and part of your support circle. Good luck, and thank you.